JR, Liz, thank you for being with us today. I've got a lot of notes, but what I'll kind of tell you is that I am privileged to have a bird's eye kind of seat of where we're at right now from the work I do every day, and that's in the automotive, mobility, and innovation space in Michigan. That's a busy space traditionally for 125 years, but now today with the innovation community, the innovation economy. The conversation's not about economic development versus environmental stewardship. It's about enabling both of those two things to happen simultaneously. And we're going to talk about that today. We have these centers, we have these handheld devices, we have these connected buildings in our life every single day. And the usage and the data consumption and the ability to utilize tools, whether it's in a manufacturing facility or an automobile or in that handheld device, it's increasing every day. I think everybody in this room knows that. I don't need to do a survey. I know everybody uses AI every day. I know everybody uses their email every day. I know a lot of people are on Instagram. So you're driving a connected vehicle. It's all here. It's very pervasive. It's also a part of the innovation growth of any place which is embracing that technology which enables all these things to happen. And if you're not part of that embracing, you will get passed. You will get left behind. This is a fact. We had 50 auto execs in this room this morning and yesterday talking about that very same thing. Whether it's China or it's Indiana, it doesn't matter, right? So we're here to talk about that today. This is fundamental infrastructure, but it has to be deployed and it has to be executed with community and citizen first. And I'm not just saying that to say it, okay? Everybody here believes that, and I know all of you do too. But I think we need to break some things down and talk about where Michigan's at, where the industry's at, where the infrastructure is at. So I'd like to start with you, Secretary, because you've got, I said I had a bird's eye view, you've seen it from the local, the state, the national, and the global perspective. And if you could just frame it for us, why it's so important to be part of the future and leaning into the future and from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate being on with you guys and seeing so many friends. Pardon me, I have a patch on my eye, but that doesn't mean I can't fully see. Little surgery on Friday. But let me just talk about a couple of things with respect to data centers that I see from my vantage point in the sort of energy column, since that seems to be an area that gets so much, has so much controversy. Number one is I firmly believe that the hyperscalers are going to be driving this clean energy future because they have commitments to their shareholders to be able to power their operations by clean energy. And the great thing is they have been investing, Google in particular has been investing in all of these next generation technologies like next generation geothermal, enhanced geothermal, the heat beneath our feet, which is baseload clean power, or next generation nuclear, small modular reactors, or these long duration energy storage, big batteries made out of materials that we don't get from China. Like there's a company called Form Energy that they have invested in that is using iron air to be able to store power for 100 hours. So it's very exciting that there has been a lot of investment in next generation technologies, which I particularly love. But the second thing that's really important is that in this moment when we're talking about costs and about prices for people, folks are wondering, am I going to have to foot the bill for these data centers? And data centers, if they're done well, can help to lower costs. And we've seen in this, and I say that because they're paying for a lot of the infrastructure, the upgrades, et cetera, if they're required to. Many of them, like Google, has raised their hand and said, we're going to do that. We don't want everyday customers to be paying for our data center. If that happens, then you've got big load users who are paying for the infrastructure of the grid, which lowers costs. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that's a lot cheaper than many other forms of energy is renewable energy. And a lot of people have been afraid that the Trump administration has really dialed back on energy policy. And to a certain extent, that's true. It's true with renewable energy. It's true with autos, obviously, electric vehicles. But interestingly, the One Big Beautiful Bill, if you took away the Inflation Reduction Act, the One Big Beautiful Bill would be the largest investment in clean energy in the nation's history, because there's the tax incentives for long duration energy storage, for batteries, the tax incentives for nuclear, the tax incentives for hydroelectric, for geothermal, et cetera, all still exist. The tax credits that were taken away were for EVs, for EV purchases, as well as for solar and wind. So here's the irony, is that even though this administration has not been friendly to renewables, because the tax credits expire next month or in the beginning of July, you've seen this rush for developers to get solar and wind projects in the ground. Consequently, at the end of 2024, when we left office, which was a record year, there were almost 60 gigawatts of clean power added to the electric grid. 60 gigawatts, that's like 30 Hoover dams worth of clean power added to the grid. Amazing. Because of these deadlines, this year, because of the rush to develop, there'll be 86 gigawatts of clean power added to the nation's electric grid. It's sort of an unintended consequence, we'll say, of cutting off these things. All of that is to say that the more clean power you add, the cheaper power becomes. And that's why the data centers driving this and having that as part of their certain data centers, not everybody, not Google is definitely at the forefront of this, but if they drive it, then you can count on, communities can count on not having to foot the bill for their energy and potentially their energy costs going down.
I figured you'd nail that one. Thank you. But by the way, interactive for all of us, so please jump in at any time. And then secondly, if you have a question, we're going to leave some time at the end. There's little blue cards. Raise it high, and one of our team will grab it from you, and we'll pass them up. Liz, let's level set. Give us the basics, because I think a lot of us know what they are, but we're probably reading the wrong things, and we're probably developing a lot of misconceptions. But break it down for us about what this infrastructure actually is.
Yeah, I mean, so you nailed it in your intro in terms of what it's powering, right? It's the services that Americans rely on every day in their personal lives, at work. I pulled up a stat, or actually my team pulled up a stat before we started. Over 560,000 businesses in Michigan depend on Google tools to connect with their customers. That's just one little stat, and we're just one company, right? So the demand for digital services, cloud services, continues to increase. Users continue to demand more things like streaming entertainment on their phones while watching the news, while their smart appliances are running on a connected home, right? So the demand continues to increase as things get cheaper, right? And then, of course, we have this new vector of demand called AI that I saw a report out this week. The average weekly usage amongst US adults in February was about 43%. And this month it jumped up to 65%. And if you narrow that in on adults under 55, between 18 and 55, that actually increases to 78%. So folks are starting to use agents and AI more regularly in their daily lives. And of course, we've got a bill to support that as well. But in terms of what they look like, it's not surprising that folks are concerned or have questions, because the average American has never had the opportunity to see a data center, right? To walk through the halls of a data center. They basically look like large, sort of boring warehouses, right? They're really high-tech warehouses, but instead of storing goods on a shelf, they're storing servers and chips and really high-tech cabling and cooling equipment. And they're a fairly unobtrusive light industrial neighbor, right? They're a high-yield, low-impact economic development opportunity. JR, I'm sure, could go on about this for a while. But there's just a lot of misconceptions that the industry has to do a better job of getting out ahead of in terms of noise and water and energy and jobs. And that's part of why we're at events like this, trying to just talk more about it.
So when let's bring it to those communities, and what I have actually been in a couple, actually several, one on the west side of Michigan and some smaller ones quite some time ago that I didn't even know were in some backyards.
Yeah.
But they are important to communities, and they are important to economic development. and they can bring real tangible asset benefits as well as community benefits. And you guys are doing this, JR, around the country. Talk to us about why that's important and why it's important for this state.
Yeah, so our company, Walbridge, if not familiar, 110-year-old construction company headquartered in Detroit. And to your point, we've been doing this for the last 10 years, primarily in New Albany, Ohio. So New Albany, Ohio has 100 data centers. And when you look at every meaningful statistic for New Albany, when you look at median home price, when you look at wage growth, when you look at tax revenue, when you look at education outcomes, it's all unbelievable, the growth they've seen in 10 years. So we've done a quarter of the 100 facilities built there, and they have another 5 gigawatts planned in the community. So we look at data centers not so much as community assets, they're community golden tickets. And to your point, they're the most least obstructive golden ticket you could have. Yeah, not a lot of jobs for FTEs, but when you look at the multiplier, it's 9 to 1. When you look at truck traffic, it's basically 0. And we've had the opportunity to work in these areas and see the growth and to see the progress. And I would only say that I completely support what Secretary Granholm said, and I'm completely behind Google. The state's gotta look and really build a coalition of why aren't we going for 100 ourselves? We're spending more time fighting over 3 than going and building out what's rightfully ours, those 100 that we need to support the economy of the future.
I think about the groundwork you laid when you were governor a lot, particularly when it comes to battery technology and where that lies. And thank you for doing that, because I think we're in a better place than you had not done that. But your thoughts on whether we embrace or we get left behind from the big picture, but really from our citizen standpoint.
Yeah, it's funny to think about the auto industry and the economic cluster that the auto industry represents, right? Data centers can create an economic cluster for Michigan too. I mean, if you think about it, batteries that are used to be backup powered and firm the grid, should build them in Michigan. Power equipment like bus bars and transformers and turbines. We're a manufacturing state. We could be building that. If the MEDC were here, I would say, if I were governor, I'd say, let's go and figure out what components we can really have a comparative advantage at and go after them. Cooling equipment. The auto industry knows cooling equipment really well. I mean, cooling plates, immersion, all of that. Just the stuff that goes into these data centers, not just the chips, et cetera, the racks, it's a $7 trillion economic opportunity by 2030. Why wouldn't a state like Michigan be manufacturing, in addition to, obviously, being home to these data centers if the right guardrails are in place? And this is why I think it's important to acknowledge the guardrails, really importantly. Kevin McNamara, are you here? He's in the back. All right, so Kevin, of course, Van Buren Township that he leads, he was instrumental in making sure that an agreement was carved with Google that ensured that the citizens that rates would not be increased, that they would not pay for any additional water use. He put guardrails around the data center that are going to benefit his community, in addition to money for the parks, et cetera. Google comes to these data centers. I point you out as Google because Google is sort of the cutting edge of how data centers should do it. They're transparent. They don't come in the cloud of darkness. They want to partner with the community. Other data center companies do that as well. But since Kevin is here and the Google DTE deal is instrumental, the community will benefit. And if we are smart about thinking over the horizon as a state, from communities to actual industrial clusters, I think Michigan could really take this on. Be the state, be the irresistible state for manufacturing this equipment in the United States.
If
Amen.
I could expand on that.
Please.
I think one element that's missing in some of the public conversation too is that we are actually incredibly incentivized to make sure that Van Buren Township stays happy with us, right? We're going to be investing billions of dollars in that facility. We will have full-time staff living there. We'll hire from there. They will send their kids to school there. Supervisor McNamara or the council with a stroke of a pen could shut us down if we do something wrong, right? If we exceed a noise ordinance, right? If we send construction, or JR sends construction traffic down the wrong road, right? So we are incredibly incentivized to do the right thing, and it's the right thing to do, right? And so I think it's important for, especially leaders who are at this conference, to understand our incentives are aligned to be a good community partner, and the locals have an incredible amount of control over how this is done to ensure it's done responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one other thing that I think
please.
is important that we haven't mentioned yet, which is the tax revenue that data centers bring, the property tax revenue, even if they get a tax abatement on their equipment, which is money that you wouldn't have seen anyway, right? But on property taxes, here's the example. In Loudoun County, Virginia, which was the initial home to all of these data centers, right? They had a whole bunch of data centers come in as well. They gave a sales tax exemption, but they did not give a property tax exemption. The property tax revenues to that county increased so dramatically that property taxes were reduced by 25% for the citizens. What's not to like about that?
Yeah, I mean, to couple on what you're saying, obviously, when you're looking at these golden tickets, that's probably the most compelling, on the surface, reason why every county in Michigan should be going after this and putting together whatever's necessary. And I think the state's done a very good job being responsible and putting together a package, like she had mentioned, regarding the sales and use tax exemption. So if you want to compete in the US, you need to have that, because there's, I think, 35 other states that have already passed something that looks very similar to it. So every county in Michigan, and I think many of us here at the conference, we understand that. And it's time that we stop playing defense today and we go on the offense, because we're not, the good message isn't getting out there. And we need to really spend more time, be much more open, much more transparent to the local communities in showing them what benefits this truly brings. The guardrails that you said are being used to keep everyone in check. And I really think the good neighbors that Google, AWS, Microsoft, and Meta are. They build these all over the country. And when you look at the places we've built, I challenged anyone to go find EPA complaints, go find, noise disruption, water pollution, electricity rates that, in especially Ohio, that have gone up. It's not there. It's not there. And, we're placating to 30 people in these townships. That's what's happening, and we're spending a ton of time wasting resources doing that.
So let's back up then, and Liz, and we'll come back to you. We don't want to be on the defensive, and we don't want to placate, but the best thing we can do is use case studies. We all love case studies, right? Because they're proof points, and we have a couple.
It all depends on which case studies, by the way. Let's be honest.
I'll use a couple of good ones. Let's talk about the legislation that was put in place, number one, and let's talk about the things that were done right with Van Buren Township and how they can be models for Michigan and other places. And then I'll have you do that first, and then Jerry, if you could go with some of what you've learned in other places about that.
Yeah, so I wish more folks would take a victory lap on the 2024 data center law that passed, because it was nation leading. I had the privilege of sort of being on the industry side of it and working closely with the legislature and the governor's office on it. And they said, we want to attract investment, but we want to do it in the right way, in a responsible way, right? And so in order to qualify for that sales and use tax exemption, we have to certify 90% clean energy procurement. We have to ensure ratepayer protections through not using any special utility tariffs, which again goes in front of the PSC, so that's a very public process. We have to use municipal water and ensure ahead of time that municipal water utility has the capacity to serve us. We have to pay 150% prevailing wage. There's probably one or two others on there that I'm forgetting. But the state has done a great job of laying that groundwork to say, we want to welcome this investment in the right way, and then put the power, as you said, in the locals' control to decide if they want these and where. Van Buren Township had long sought to attract the right type of industrial development to expand and diversify their tax base. And look, has everything been perfect? No, of course not. It's a conversation, it's a process, it's a negotiation. But at the end of the day, we've come to a deal that's mutually beneficial. We're excited about the site and the opportunity to develop there. We think the value proposition in terms of the tens of millions of dollars of additional tax revenue to pay for local services is really compelling. We're going to have a couple hundred jobs there. We're going to have probably a couple thousand construction jobs there. And we're going to make that our home for the next 20 years, right? We're going to have employees living and working there. So I think that's the sort of boring story behind the scenes of how this gets done the right way, and that story doesn't often get told as publicly as maybe we would hope.
JR, keywords are had long sought is what they did. So you just mentioned communities should be looking. You see that in other places, and you've seen economic growth happen because I've driven to New Albany to visit that. I mean, it's pretty wild and I've been there many years ago too to see what's going on there, and it's a vibrant place.
Yeah.
Employing a lot of people.
Yeah, and I would just comment, we're all very familiar with Ohio. I mean, we're not talking about some abstract Western Texas frontier that none of us could really understand. Ohio is our neighbor, they're our friend, but they're also our competition. And when you look at Columbus, because New Albany, Dublin, and Hilliard are all suburbs of Columbus, all built out. It's unbelievable. Well, then you just drive an hour south and you go to Jeffersonville. That's a huge AWS campus. You drive east to Millersport, that's Vantage. The whole state wants data centers, and they want them for the same reasons we want them. And when you look at, like I said, every major metric that matters to the citizens of Michigan, they've all gone up. Yeah. They've all gone up. So, it all depends if we're going to get into the nuances, if it's going to be a closed loop system or it's going to be something else, or are we going to use generators? I mean, the generators don't even run, an hour maybe to just keep them able to run a test once a month. BESS or generators, all I'm trying to say is we're getting way too caught up in nuances and letting a small group throw us off our game when everybody here, I think, sees the impact because we're here talking about data centers as community assets. These are the foundation of the economy of the future that we're living in today. It doesn't stop here. Why do you think Intel went to Columbus? Well, because there's 100 data centers there. It's one of the reasons. If we can build what you just said, that whole infrastructure of the supply chain, the data centers, get chip manufacturing in Flint like it was supposed to go to, ultimately build out all the educational requirements, we would be building humanoids here. We could be building part of the satellites for Elon Musk's data centers or Peter Thiel's data centers he wants to put into the Great Lakes or the oceans. There's so much opportunity. We just have, I laugh at my dad because we were coming up here and he gave a talk on cohesion in 2007. And he talks about a plant Michigan lost to Tennessee for Volkswagen. And he said when he met with Volkswagen in Germany, they laid out why Michigan isn't cohesive, which we can all agree upon. If there was one time we had to get cohesive, one time, if we could do it to get the economy of the future here to make Michigan great again, that's the time to get cohesive. Because we need everyone rowing in the right direction.
We do. I do think, though, we have to, I understand the frustration of going to town halls and having 30 people, However,
Yeah, you were there.
it is a pervasive sentiment across the country now.
Yeah.
And Kevin McNamara would say was that his deal was better because he listened to the people about what he should negotiate into it to address their concerns. And so the project is therefore more durable and more accepted and part of the community as opposed to being foisted on them. So I think it's important to listen and important to hear the fears. I mean, number one fear, I think, is that everyday citizens' rates are going to go up. If you can take that away, and that can either be through negotiation, through the PSC, or legislatively, you take away the fear of their water rates going up or the use of water, and that also, that the law was great, but it doesn't have anything in there about protecting the Great Lakes watershed. That might be something that would be a plus into the future. But if they know the rates aren't going to go up, and if they know it's going to be clean energy, so they don't have to worry about particulates or anything like that, and they know that there's a community benefit agreement that comes with it, and so whether it's paying for weatherization for citizens in the community or paying for a park or whatever it is, I mean, to Liz's point, these townships have leverage, and this is a moment to really have a partner to make it work well. So you have to acknowledge, I think, the fears of people, and when you go in under the cover of darkness, it creates conspiracies, right? So if you are open and transparent about it, it makes it a little easier. But once these are in place, I think, don't you think it takes down a lot of the fear and the concern? Like in places like New Albany, they've seen them, they know them. You're not going to get the same kind of resistance.
Yeah, and I think to your point, you have to be, that's getting on the offensive.
Right.
That's getting on the offensive, not being on the defensive, and I totally agree. The ones that we've seen succeed are the ones that are Google. They're transparent,
Yeah.
they're in the meetings, they're explaining things in good detail so that they are calming citizens' fears of the unknown. But at the end of the day, you also can't be like, I'm having a 6-month moratorium.
Yeah.
Because you have no facts? No, because 30 township residents want us to have a moratorium. I mean, that's literally what's happening in the state and across the country. In those counties, I believe the leadership, they're not representing what's in the best interests of those citizens. They're just folding like tents because they don't want to go through a recall. They don't want to have to go. I mean, it's where we are today being ranked so low in so many statistics. I can't even understand how you would just set a moratorium up and not even engage in the discussion you're talking about. Or take Van Buren's agreement and send it to every county in the Michigan and say, this is the gold standard, let's send it and let's work to this because it is so good. And I would also say Saline's is good too. We can't turn our back on them. They've made a significant impact there, and I think their community benefits agreement is very good also.
So Grace, I knew we wouldn't get through all the questions. But I do want to stick, before we get to audience questions, I do want to talk about something you mentioned, and Liz, have you go second. We are surrounded by fresh water. It's very important to us. It's our literal lifeblood. It's an asset for today and the future. I grew up on Lake Superior in Marquette. Every morning I walked up the front driveway and I could see that. And so it's really important to me personally, but it's important to those citizens, right? And so is electrical and electricity consumption. But you said we can be more than this groundbreaking legislation. We could do even more and break some more ground. What are your thoughts on that balance between progress and responsibility?
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear what Liz has to say about this. But if I were in the legislature, I'd be interested in adding to that bill and say, if you're coming to Michigan because of our incredible love for the Great Lakes and our watershed, we would want you to either bring cooling your system that is either a closed loop or reusing water or air-cooled. Google, I'm sure Liz will say this, Google has a commitment to replenish watersheds, 120% replenishment, which is great. But you'd want, Google happens to be a good actor, but you'd want others to be able to do that too. So putting something into law that would that would enshrine that to give people trust, I think would be important.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's important to take a step back on the water conversation. Why do we use water in the first place? I think many folks in Michigan who are familiar with industrial activities get this, but nationwide, the average layperson does not, right? I have to explain this to my mother all the time. It's like, why are you using up all the water, right? The reason we use water at all for evaporative cooling is because it makes our data centers much more energy efficient. It can reduce energy usage by 10 to 20%. On the hottest, most humid days of the year, AKA peak grid events, when you want us to be the most efficient, it can decrease our energy usage by 25%. So that's why. And then the average person is just not familiar with the volume of water that is used in industrial settings, right? So these numbers sound large and scary. At Google, we have a commitment to be 100% transparent about our water use. I reference this all the time. Page 110 of our environmental report, which you can find online, lists by site how much water we use. And we put a little golf course equivalent next to it to help to contextualize it. Where we use evaporative cooling, it's at our larger sites, it's like 1 or 2 golf courses worth of water. Sounds less scary when you contextualize it. But importantly, we only use water for evaporative cooling if a site and a locality have passed a very rigorous science-based watershed health analysis. So we work really closely with local, state, regional hydrologists, watershed experts, et cetera, to confirm that that is a resilient, sustainable source of water in terms of the watershed itself. The next step is then moving to the utility, right? Does the utility have capacity to serve us, right? So we have to move through a bunch of different processes. And to the Secretary's point, we self-regulate on this, right? We have been in instances where localities have offered us water for cooling, and we've actually turned it down. We've said, we actually don't think this is a sustainable use of water here. And we've gone another cooling route, or we've tried to find gray water or industrial water, right? Other options. So we're absolutely open to that. And I'm looking at folks from Eagle in the room, right? That conversation, right? If the state can look at frameworks that provide better holistic protection across the board for water usage, we're all for that conversation. Of course, we want to balance that with the right order of operations for development, right? So that you're not, sitting through a 2-year process on something and JR's crew is waiting to, put shovels in the ground.
Yeah,
in the
just
ground.
costs Google more money.
Yeah. But so, yeah.
That was a joke.
Just pay you to wait there on the site. Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground so far, but I want to bring it back to the people and jobs. Jared, I'll start with you. The centers themselves on a long term, you mentioned it, they're not big FTA generators, but they are local jobs and then here and now in construction. But there's also an impact to the community because what's one of the things that we're hurting for the most in the state is skilled trades. And I just had 50 auto execs here the last 2 days, and they are absolutely dying for it. So, and there's a multiplier effect, not just economically, but from a skill set enhancement too. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I'd look at it in 2 buckets. One is just the temporary jobs to build the facility and the supply chain that's been mentioned many times. When you look at the campuses that are being built in southeastern Michigan, Saline and Van Buren, those are going to be about 2,500 tradespeople. The nice thing about that is, first and foremost, a lot of those, I shouldn't say a lot, some of those individuals have spent a majority of their time on the road. As I mentioned.
JR, did you say 22,000?
Sorry,
2,200.
2,500.
Okay, got it. Okay.
A lot of those individuals have spent time on the road. And I mentioned we've been building in Ohio for 10 years. And there's a lot of Michigan companies that are building with us at those facilities around Columbus. So many of those tradespeople get to come home, okay, pay employer and employee taxes into Michigan. Obviously, there's a big sales tax impact on the construction, okay? And those 2,500 jobs at each of those campuses will matriculate into what I had mentioned earlier, when you look at the FTE count at the campus, let's say it's between 500 and 1,000, it's a 9-to-1, and I didn't make that up, that's from Accenture, but through the supply chain, through the facility maintenance, through all of the support services, because these things take a ton of people to maintain. Chilled water loops, electrical distribution, changing out servers and racks. It's an army of people. And to your last point about skilled trades, this is, I would say, if there was a time, this is the time to reinvest in that training for skilled trades. And we're in talks right now with 4 universities and nonprofit plus for-profit training facilities to locate in Southeast Michigan to start building out this army of people that we're going to need. And this is the perfect opportunity to be the epicenter and be world-class when it comes to the curriculum that needs to be designed, because it doesn't exist anywhere else right now, what we're talking about. Northern Virginia Community College has done something for Google. Wisconsin and Racine, Madison, and Milwaukee campuses for UW are working with Microsoft, but on more of the AI side. I don't know if that's so much software, servers, or that type of architecture. We could be the blue collar. We are going to train people, 7-month degrees, certificates, 2-year and 4-year programs from all around the state of Michigan to be the leaders and the experts in taking care of these facilities, because they're going to last much longer than 20 years.
I love this because, it's not just that, so the job is over when the data center is built, but to your point, all of the auto industry is saying, we need skilled trade people. So it just leads them into this, to this lifelong career here. It's so great.
Liz, any thoughts? I mean, workforce is important to you.
Workforce is important, yeah. I mean, we have our own programs that we invest heavily in, and then look for these locally led training sort of consortiums that we can also lean into, like your Northern Virginia example. We can't find enough folks, right? You can't find enough folks. And these are really highly paid, family-sustaining careers, right? And I bristle a little bit when folks talk about them being temporary because, I mean, your backlog is, I don't know if you want to share it publicly, but the backlog in terms of the development of these is enormous, right? And folks move from one to the other and then come back to maybe one they started on, right? Because they're going to add a building, or they're going to retrofit a building, or we have to change out the chillers, or whatever the case might be. So folks make careers out of these things, right? And we also like to poach from our construction team sometimes for our operational full-time roles. We have folks at our Iowa and Nebraska sites who started out in construction, have moved on to be, operational full-time staff. And so, sure, we can't promise that we're going to keep a construction crew, employed for 20 years, but the last 20 years where we have been building these, it's steady, right? And they've got to move around a little bit, right, to different sites, but they're really high-quality jobs.
Let's hit one more before we go to Q&A, and that is the balance between data centers and the resilient grid. Secretary.
Yeah, let me just say this. Data centers can be a huge grid asset, again, if it's done well. So one of the things that we should consider in Michigan is requiring that data centers agree to be flexible on their loads at the moment when the grid is at peak. So at any given time, like right now, the grid in Michigan is half used. It's built for the worst case scenarios. So in the hottest days and the coldest days. You got a big user coming in. What if they either agreed to dial back or shift loads to another part, or they add batteries to be able to keep running all the time, which is what Google has done. If you get that flexibility, then the data center actually becomes a grid asset. It fortifies the grid. It allows us to use the existing grid better. And it's one of the things that many hyperscalers have been saying is, let's make better use of the existing grid in that huge headroom that we have, so that we don't have to expend all this money building out new transmission, et cetera. So there's things like grid enhancing technologies, these advanced conductors that put twice as much power on the existing grid than currently exists because they were strung so many years ago. wow, you don't have to add new lines, you just add twice the power on. Those kinds of things and flexibility are cool. There's one other thing I just want to say. I'm super excited about the possibility of data centers paying for, and this hasn't fully happened yet, so I'm just saying this, putting a notion in Google's ear, but paying for batteries for homes, maybe batteries in solar, maybe heat pumps, and then stringing all those batteries together with the permission of the homeowner to be able to create virtual power plants. And that means that you can use and that's true with EV batteries as well. And if the homeowner gives permission, the utility can compensate them. So what if, and in many places there are pilots of these virtual power plants and this flexibility happening, a homeowner can get $150 a month, a couple $1,000s a year for allowing access to a battery, whether it's vehicle or at home, that gives the ability of the grid to be well used, and the data center to be an anchor of that, because then they can count that capacity as part of their needs. So there's lots of creative things that are happening, and Michigan could be at the forefront of that.
I'm going to have you touch on that, Liz, but fun fact related to that. So there has been a lot of controversy about what we've invested in from a state. And many of you know there was a battery plant built by Lansing. That plant is now owned by LG. And what it is doing is building batteries for Tesla, which are going to the grid in Texas. We're already involved
Ford's
in
doing
this.
the same thing, yeah.
Yes.
It's awesome
Right.
what's happening, to be able to be that flexible and to have, and stock has gone up as a result.
Liz?
Yeah, well, it's hard to follow the secretary on that. I would underline everything she said. We are equally as excited about all of those opportunities. Our teams have actually been working, and I'll check my energy colleague over here. To my recollection, we've had an internal aspirational program to do more distributed energy resource sort of investment for many years, but we're just only now, he's giving me the thumbs up, I didn't mess that up too bad. We're just only now able to crack the surface of that, right? Because it's, historically, we haven't had a commercial pathway to invest in it, right? And so we're actually finding that our sort of grid capacity constraints and challenges, when we're working closely with our utility partners to try to get more creative, is enabling sort of a more holistic opportunity for us to invest in these types of pathways, the grid enhancing technologies, distributed energy resources, et cetera. It's really exciting. There's so much opportunity to make better use of the existing grid that also is a win for communities, right? So Van Buren Township, hypothetically, right, if we could find commercial pathways, should see an outsized benefit of Google investing there and having a presence, because we could direct more funding and resources to distributed energy capacity there, right? It could also be a statewide program, right? But you can start to see this win-win-win if we can get these partnerships and commercial pathways set up the right way.
So before we go to Q&A, we'll start in the end. We'll start to come back this way. Trust is foundational to everything, right? We all learn that, right? So this is really important with people, our citizens and communities. What is one thing or some things that you've seen or we can learn, not necessarily just from the everyday work that you're doing today, but in your experience with regards to our communities and our citizens to build trust moving forward? Yeah,
I mean, I think first of all, transparency is number one, that people have to feel like they know who's coming in and that they're not, that it's not a mystery and they're not, like, oh, so-and-so's coming in. That's number one. And number two, as Kevin did in Van Buren Township, listening to the community, having the opportunity for hearing, listening. I know it can be a painful thing, but listening to them and then taking their ideas and negotiating them into an agreement, I think is part of the way of building trust. You have to have trusted actors. I mean, Google's got a good reputation, so it's trusted itself. But the surrounding, scaffolding has to be built in a way that the community feels like the data center is a partner and not taking something from them.
Thank you. Jer?
Yeah, I obviously completely agree with what you said. It starts day one with that transparency and openness. Absolutely need to listen to the constituents and understand the pain points in the community, and they need to be addressed. I would only just say we don't, placating 30 people is a bit ridiculous, but when you look at ultimately the attributes of the data center itself and see what it can bring a community, as I said before, it is relative to all other assets. It's basically a standalone building that doesn't generate a lot of traffic, doesn't obviously emit emissions or contaminate soils with forever plastics, doesn't manufacture. And we're all picking on Kevin because they did such a great job in Van Buren. That asset is the equivalent to 4,000 new homes being built in Van Buren. And think about that. Think about the strain on public safety, on roads, on the education system, 4,000 new homes. You just got the tax revenue of 4,000 new homes when you put a data center there with none of the strain on your infrastructure. And that's got to be the message from day one. It's going to make everybody's quality of life better, especially when you've said it best. The guardrails are there. It's put in an appropriate place in an industrial zone, zoned for the right use. That's the best thing I think any community could have as it relates to an asset. It's a true golden ticket.
So we as
golden ticket.
We need to be really careful about how we come out of the gate, not make assumptions. And I've said it probably 7 times now about being community first. And I think it's important, because you touched on it earlier, to match up with as best as possible. This is one community, those that seek it. But Liz, what's your kind of advice coming out of the gate to do this better and do it right?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we overcomplicate it, and you just got to show up in person, shake hands, earn that trust. Coming out of the gate strong with project facts, right? We're going to do X, Y, Z. We don't plan to do A, B, C, right? Showing up consistently, staying in conversation. And I think, the sort of advantage that Michigan has is you don't have to trust us, right? You can trust that Michigan has a really strong set of guardrails in place that lift up the floor on how industry can invest here in Michigan, right? And then each community can decide what's important to them, right? If Google is interested in a new county or township somewhere, what are those local priorities you want to see us show up to support, right? Is it sidewalks? Is it roads? Is it schools? Is it, you name it? And we're going to figure out the right way to get to a mutually beneficial partnership. But a company like Google, we want to come in and commit locally. We're going to be there for 20, 30 years. We're going to invest in the grid. We're going to ensure and safeguard affordability because it's the right thing to do, and it's also the right thing for our business. It's the right thing for our investment.
So my job just got automated because the questions are popping up in front of us here. So let's, this one, I'm going to read it, and then you guys jump in. How can we develop an education strategy for the public, residents? We're losing the narrative. Who's responsible for the marketing?
Well, those are 2 questions, right?
Yep.
Okay. I think we touched upon the education strategy. It's going to be, for state of Michigan, it's in its infancy right now. I would say the curriculum is so new, there isn't a standardization out there. But we spoke about skilled trades. We talked about, obviously the skilled trade training centers are ready for the unions. They exist. They exist today. And there's no reason why young kids out of high school shouldn't be matriculating into them. I would say that we've done very little work collectively, construction, skilled trades, data centers. There's no marketing out there. We were just talking about this, about building out. What does that look like nationwide? I don't know if you guys remember the Army. They did a complete rebrand, and remember the days when we'd go to the cinema and there'd be a bunch of ads before the movie played, and there'd be those Army ads with guys jumping out of helicopters and, frogmen and, doing great stuff, and be like, oh my gosh, I should be in the Army.
Yeah.
Like, I'm inspired.
That's cool.
We're working towards right now getting that type of plan in action, not only statewide, nationwide, because we can see right now people have forgotten about how great construction skilled trades are. Yeah, you're not going to make $250,000 your first day, but you're certainly going to get there by year 3, 4, or 5 with overtime and where we are in the build out of the economy 2.0.
Yeah, I
Secretary.
read this question a little bit differently. I think it's super important on that.
Well, it wasn't 2 questions?
Well, I read them as related, which is how do we get the word out, right? How do we combat
Yes.
this negative narrative that is happening? And I would say one thing that's important is for these grass top voices who are here to feel confident in saying good things about data centers and to be answering the questions of people. I think we all have a responsibility. And, you know, we're in an election year. Make sure that the folks who are running for office understand the importance of a balanced solution, of guardrails, yes, but not chasing data centers away. If we don't, you know, if Michigan is not inviting, they're going to go somewhere else. We will just have lost the opportunity, right? And we have to have, you know, just from a national security perspective, we've got to have these data centers in the United States so that we've got control over the AI applications, et cetera. There's an international and global national security perspective in addition to a Michigan and the US perspective. But if we don't do it, other states will get it. Some people may say, well, that's fine. Well, that means that we haven't done our job as citizens in educating other people. So I'd encourage folks here to also be voices.
Yeah, I would just echo what you said because it's been interesting over the last 18 months while this topic nationwide got hotter and hotter, and obviously all of our algorithms only carry the negative news of data centers. For some reason, we can't figure that out, but there's been very little support of candidates openly saying that data centers are golden tickets. They've shied away from the whole conversation. I can't believe it's that polarizing. I look at it, it's an 80-20 issue. Everybody wants better safety. Everybody wants better education. Everybody should, and I think, believe data centers help support that. It's an 80-20 issue. And when you look at the gubernatorial candidates and you look at some of the individuals running for local elections this cycle, they're not, to your point, yeah, you're right, they're not coming out promoting it. So it's kind of hard when you're looking at the leaders of the state and they're not making a move. They're just keeping silence.
But we have
on
to
it.
get some of this information.
Well,
Oh, yeah. But
That's the thing.
we need our leaders in the state to lead. And we've offered that coalition of the willing that we're putting together. Anybody who wants to go to New Albany, anybody that wants to meet with the right hyperscalers, we're willing to help facilitate those so that the right people in the right room asking the right questions.
And I will
getting the
say,
right
I mean, I think the
information.
Whitmer administration in pushing
Yeah.
for this has been doing an amazing job, being willing to stand up and push for these. But
I agree.
There needs to be more.
And kudos to her and her team and the Eagle folks and
Yep.
the policy folks, because I've been working with them and I've seen it. But that team is going to leave. And I think you just, I think a call to action, because this conference, we're talking about some really more difficult things than we've ever talked about. And one of the candidates did come out with a platform. He's not a candidate anymore. So we got to move on, unfortunately. But the other candidates, they have a responsibility to the citizens of this state on issues which are going to bring us into the future, to be public about them and to tell us how they feel about them. I really feel strongly about that. I think that's what you're saying.
And help educate. Yep.
Yeah. We got another question, or? Liz, do you have anything to add about the narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think our industry groups have lagged behind the pace of investment, right? So the Data Center Coalition started out as a little working group of the Northern Virginia Technology Council, and it had like a couple $1 million budget, while simultaneously industry was pouring hundreds of billions into new investment, right? So that organization can only scale so fast. And in the meantime, we are really leaning in on folks like state and regional chambers, labor, our partners in the supply chain, et cetera. It probably doesn't surprise you that all the hyperscalers, we have a healthy sort of competition and distrust of each other. So jumping all in on something together can take us a little longer than usual. But we're getting there, and I say all of that to emphasize we as industry know we need to do a better job of getting out there, of getting proof points, doing events like this. And to come back to the Secretary's call to action, I don't even really ask you to be pro data center or pro Google. Just be pro open mind and pro facts, right? And if you're having those conversations with other leaders in your community, to say, I don't know, maybe you should look at the details and make an informed decision. Maybe it's not that bad, or maybe it could be really good, right? And we need to come in as industry and better support that.
What inning are we in? Are we in the second or third inning, or are we in the seventh or eighth in terms of data center build?
Feels like the 11th.
Good question. Didn't put it on a card, but I will accept that question. That's a great question. Thank you. What inning are we in, Governor?
Oh,
Secretary?
I'm looking at Liz. You tell me, what inning
you
are
all
we
can
in?
answer it. Well, Liz, you start then. What inning are we in with regards to this?
Gosh, that's hard to answer.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, some of our oldest, we have 35 sites across 4 continents. Our oldest sites are 18, 19, 20 years old. The last couple of years has been a hockey stick of growth, right? So if you're starting from 20 years ago, then yeah, sure, it feels like we're in the 11th inning, right? If you're starting from COVID or when ChatGPT was released, we're in like the second, right? But the chips keep getting more efficient, the buildings keep getting more efficient, the new technologies that we're all investing in are gonna start coming online here soon. So I think we have to wait out this year a little bit, right? Midterm year is gonna be tough. But I'm hopeful that there's a lot of great things ahead in the near-term future.
So let's finish back to this question up here because I think it's important to what we were talking
Can
about
they
before.
see the question? Do they see
I'm
the
going to
question?
repeat it. I'm going to
Okay,
repeat it.
all right.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's just for the 4 of us.
Oh, nice.
So it's back to leadership. The legislature, we know we're going to have new leaders. We don't know who they're going to be. We don't know what party they're going to be, but we know they have to function better. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. We know we're going to have a new governor, and that governor has got to set a tone for the future. There's fundamental structural things. That's not what this panel is about, but this panel is about the future and whether we're part of it or we let it pass us by. If you were the governor, Secretary,
Been there, done that.
bought the t-shirt, what would you do still, though, if you were elected this fall on this issue? What's something you would do? And
There's
then,
3 things I
JR
would do.
and Liz, you get to answer that question.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up.
I would definitely do what I was just referring to regarding supply chain analysis and see what we can be in leadership in manufacturing, since that's part of our DNA and our backbone. I would enhance the existing great law by requiring in the law that data centers BYOC, bring your own capacity, bring your own power. Even though they don't get the tax credit unless they do that, I would tweak that and add it a little bit more. And third, I would really push on the data centers being part of the community benefit by providing citizens with the opportunity to have batteries, solar, electric. I might even subsidize electric vehicles and take that on as a data center for a community where it's locating. But I would have a community benefits agreement. There's one other thing. Speed is critical in this game right now, and all these other states are really hungry. And if a data center can go to a state and be welcome and get permitting done quickly, that has a lot, that makes that state more irresistible. So I might tie permitting times to good actors, in addition to bringing 90% clean power.
Thank you. JR and Liz, one thing, not 3 things.
Oh, sorry.
No. You get to
It
do
said
3.
3 here.
But you earned the right to do 3.
I had 4.
JR and Liz, one thing, and we'll wrap it up.
And I think as governor of Michigan, I would take the position publicly that we're open for business and that we should be doing everything to have 100 data centers and taking all those great ideas and maybe even doing some more extreme stuff. Someone said something about the Great Lakes, right? Data centers can cool easily in the Great Lakes. I mean, we do have those resources, and finding a way.
All right, now you're going too far.
Well, I'm just saying. you've got at this stage of the game, where right now the forefront, because of natural gas, will be Pennsylvania, West Virginia, New Mexico, Texas, and Louisiana. Those will be epicenters where a lot of gigawatts are going to get built out. We want our fair share, or I say our unfair share, of those data centers in Michigan, and we've got to do some things that is going to move the needle to get. I totally agree with you on the permitting. We've got to be open for business on getting this done by any means necessary.
Liz, bring us home.
Yeah, I would underline the Secretary's last idea. I love the concept of a structure that incentivizes good behavior, and in exchange, we get commercial value by getting to go fast, right? And that it makes sure that Michigan gets the type of development it wants. That list can be whatever, right? That list can include CBAs, can include GETs and DERs, and I'm going to throw all sorts of acronyms at you, right? Like all the cool things, right? We got to make sure it's attainable, right? We don't want it to make the list, so incredible that no one in the world can attain it. But I love that as a structure, and I'd be excited to work on that with a future governor.
Thank you all for being here, and
you
please thank you to the panel for joining us.
Awesome. Great.
Thank you so much.
Great job.
Yeah.